Hi, welcome at this online training course. I'm going to show you how to configure private VLAN IDs on a distributed virtual port group and also on a Cisco switch. So let's kick off. First of all, a little introduction. My name is Eric Sloof. I'm a certified VMware instructor. I'm also a freelance consultant, and of course I'm blogging at ntpro.nl. This presentation will lead you through configuring VLAN IDs on both the vSphere environment and the physical Cisco switch. You will get a good understanding of trunking on the Cisco switch and DV port group settings, and at the end you're able to configure a Cisco switch using Cisco's network assistant, and you completely understand the different DV port group settings regarding VLAN IDs. So first of all, the agenda, the introduction. We just had the introduction. I'm going to show you my home lab setup. We also are looking at the Cisco Network Assistant. We're going to explore the DV port group settings regarding the VLANs. And I'm going to create a private community and isolated VLAN. And of course there will be a lot of demos in this presentation. So it's a little bit of lecture, it's a little bit of demoing in my home lab. It will be fun. My home lab setup, my test environment is based on two ESX4 hosts running on Asus barebones. They're really cheap, around 600 euros, and you have an up and running ESX4 host. I connected both the ESX servers to the Cisco Catalyst 2960G. It's a real cool device, you see it right here, because it has no VAN, it consumes no power, a little bit of power, but it's equipped with the full Catalyst iOS, so you can do all the cool things with this physical switch. What I also did is filled up my ESX host with all the network cards I could buy. So I have enough physical NICs in my physical Cisco physical systems. Sorry. So I've created some virtual machines, 4 of them. And they are ranging from 101 to 104 IP addresses. I'm also going to show you how to use a virtual router based on the free SCO router floppy. It was used during the 3.5 and 3.0 courses. The router will become a gateway between the production network, where I'm in right now, and the private VLAN ID network that's ending on 2.1. So I have internet available, I have a DNS available, they are all routed through my fridge box, and my fridge box is located at 192.168.178.1. The Cisco switch based on the Cisco Catalyst 2960G. It's a real cool device, I already said that. It's connected to my 2 ESX hosts. Port 2 is connected to ESX4-L, and L stands for left. And port 3 is connected to my ESX4-R. So both ESX hosts are only using one physical NIC, and those physical NICs are connected to ports 2 and to port 3. The IP address, the management IP address of my physical Cisco switch is 192.168.178.2. We need that later on when we are going to use the management assistant from Cisco. So what's really nice is the Cisco Discovery Protocol. I've enabled the Cisco Discovery Protocol both on my ESX host and on my Cisco switch. And you see right here that the port ID of ESX4-L is connected to /2. So this is the network card in my left ESX4 server. This is the network card in my right ESX4 server. And they are both connected to the physical Cisco switch. The Cisco Network Assistant, I could do everything through the command line, but it's real hard. It doesn't present that well. There is also an alternative. Cisco created the Cisco Network Assistant, and it's an application running on it's running on Windows, and it's based on Java, and you can do everything you can do through the command line is also possible, I think, through this user interface. This is how it looks. It's a real nice application, a bit sluggish, but it will work out. And this is the part where we are going to look at how to configure the ports and how to put in dynamic trunking or static VLAN IDs, everything so I'm going to show you how to configure the Cisco switch, but also how to configure the ESX servers. So a native VLAN ID on a Cisco switch. When you unbox the Cisco switch and you power it on for the first time, it's already configured, and you will see that all the ports are connected to VLAN ID 1. It's the default VLAN ID Cisco uses. What I did here is I have configured VLAN ID 20 on port 2 and 3. You don't have to do anything at your ESX host, but you actually are splitting up your Cisco switch. So a virtual machine connected to the physical network card in this port cannot talk to a virtual machine on the other port. So this is the basic VLAN ID on the Cisco switch, but we're going to explore this further on. The DV port group settings, there are 4 different kind of settings possible on a distributed virtual port group. You can put it on none, and then you don't use VLAN IDs. And when you put it on none, you can still do VLAN ID tagging on your Cisco switch right here. So that's not really fancy, but it works. You can also put in a VLAN ID ranging from 1 to 4094, and it's a single VLAN ID on one of your port groups, and the traffic will be tagged with that specific VLAN ID. You can also configure this switch for trunking, and trunking means that you are not tagging or untagging packets, but you are letting the packets flow through to your virtual machines. And what's really interesting on a distributed virtual switch is private VLAN ID tagging, where you can create multiple VLAN IDs within one private VLAN. So, first of all, none. The distributed switch does not tag or untag packets. Okay. This setting is the same as VLAN ID 0 on a standard virtual switch. Remember the standard virtual switch. You can put in a VLAN ID right there. And the ESX host's physical NICs cannot be connected to the native VLAN port on the Cisco switch. So let's take a look at none. Let's see how it works. I'm going to minimize my PowerPoint presentation. I have my virtual center server right here. I'm connected to my virtual center server. I have a lot of virtual machines, but only 4 virtual machines are powered on. I have the Cisco network assistant right here. You can see that both my ESX hosts are connected to the switch. We have the virtual machine, the VM client, really cool tool. You can download it at vmclient.nl. We're going to use this to do some pinging between the virtual machines, and that's what we really need. So let's create a VLAN ID none. Okay, so we're going to go to Virtual Center. We're going to go to the Home, Networking, and we're going to add a distributed virtual switch. Okay, so I'm only using one DV uplink port. By assigning one DV uplink port, it means that every ESX host will use one physical NIC connected to this distributed virtual switch. I leave the name default. Now I must select a physical network card. I also must decide which ESX hosts are added to this distributed virtual switch. I have to look at my notes. ESX4-L uses 3 and ESX4-R uses 0. Okay, I'm going to click next and I'm going to click finish. Let's see if everything was configured correctly. Yeah, okay, finish. So the distributed virtual switch is created and it's automatically configured at both my ESX servers. What's also nice is that when you are creating a distributed switch, you will notice that there is also a default port group on this switch. So let's configure the virtual machines and connect them to the port group. Virtual machine 1 must be connected with the virtual network adapter to the newly configured port group. Okay. We do the same for virtual machine 2. Okay. virtual machine 3. Okay. And virtual machine 4. Okay, all virtual machines are connected to the distributed virtual port group. Let's see if they can ping each other. I'm at virtual machine 1 right now. I must be able to ping virtual machine 4. It works great. So let's do another one. I'm at virtual machine 3 right now. And I must be able to ping to virtual machine 2. Okay, works. I don't have internet access. Okay, why not? Because the virtual machines are in a normal. Oh, maybe I have internet now. I don't have internet. They're in a normal port. They are not routed to the internet. So let's see how Cisco looks. The Cisco switch. Port 2 and 3 are the ports we are using. They are both configured in a static VLAN ID. So if I want to modify those ports, I can put it on static, and I'm going to provide a static address of VLAN ID 20. I'm also doing it for port 3. I'm going to create a static address for port 20. Okay, so don't forget to actually also configure your VLAN IDs. So let's create VLAN ID 20, leave the naming default. Okay. Apply. Apply. And the Cisco switch is configured. So when I'm returning to my virtual machine, I must still be able to ping the other virtual machines. It can take 1 or 2 minutes before the Cisco switch is rebooted, reconfigured. So let's hope it will reconfigure itself correctly. Let's wait for that. Well, it's reconfigured, so it is able to ping. I have a problem because I don't have internet access in this virtual machine. I want to go to a really cool website, but there's no internet access. So what I did was that I added one other virtual machine, and it's a router virtual machine. And this virtual machine is based on a floppy with a really small Cisco OS on it. I'm going to edit the settings of this virtual machine. There are 2 network adapters. One network adapter is connected to my production network. The other network adapter is connected to my distributed port group. I click OK, and let's try to power this one on. So while it's powering on, we're going to take a look at the network configuration. Hosting clusters, ESX, distributed switch. We see that 2 virtual machines on ESX4, virtual machine 1 and 2, are connected to my DV uplink 1, and DV uplink 1 is configured with VMNIC 3. And on ESX4 we are going to the configuration, distributed virtual switch. Two virtual machines are connected to VMNIC 0 on ESX4, and also the router is connected to VMNIC 0. So I must be able to access the internet through virtual machine 1. The traffic will flow through my Cisco switch, and eventually the router will route the internet traffic to my virtual machine. So let's take a look at virtual machine 1. And let's see if I'm able to. I'm first going to show you the IP configuration. So this is 201. My default gateway is 2.1. This is the IP address of the virtual router. And let's see if the router will let my traffic through. It works. It functions great. So this is cool. This is okay. I didn't configure any VLAN ID tagging on my distributed switch, and I configured VLAN ID tagging on my Cisco switch. So let's take a look at the settings. VLAN ID tagging, none. We're going to take a look at the other options later on. Cool. let's continue with the next slide. So, VLAN. When you're using VLAN, you are configuring a single VLAN ID on one of your port groups. The VLAN can range from 1 to 4094, and the Cisco switch must be configured with trunking. This is the most common selection. You will see this setting in most environments. So let's check out if we can configure VLAN ID tagging and configure VLAN trunking on the Cisco switch. So let's do the ESX host first. I'm going to my distributed port group. I'm going to edit the settings. I'm going to VLAN. I'm selecting VLAN, and we are going to use VLAN ID 21. Okay. So the virtual machines are in a VLAN right now. I only have to configure my physical Cisco switch. So let's go to the VLANs on the Cisco switch. First of all, we create a VLAN ID 21. Okay. We are going to configure the ports. We are going to modify them, and we are going to say that this is a trunk port. And you can say which ports are allowed. You can put all in this setting, but all the VLAN IDs will be routed to the ESX host. So it's better to actually configure the VLAN IDs you're using. So I put 21 in here. I'm going to modify the other one. I'm also give it 21 with trunking 21. Okay. Apply. Okay. So virtual machine 1 must be able to visit the internet. Correct me if I'm wrong. So let's see if that's actually working. Well, it isn't. Let's find out what's wrong. Can I ping virtual machine 4? No, I can't. Maybe we have to wait for the physical Cisco switch. Yeah, there it is right now. So it needs some time to reconfigure all the VLAN settings. I'm able to ping VM4. I'm able to ping VM3. I'm able to visit the internet. VMware.com. Okay, so that works great. The virtual machines are connected to a virtual machine port group. The virtual machine port group is configured with VLAN ID 21, and the Cisco switch is configured with VLAN ID trunking. You see it here, right here, those ports. And a virtual machine connected to this physical network card or this port is able to go through this switch and eventually visit the internet. So this is real great. So we did the VLAN. Let's take it a step further and do VLAN trunking. The traffic is passed to the guest virtual machine with VLAN tags intact. So the virtual machines are not stripped. They must strip the VLANs on their own. On the standard switch, this option can be configured by specifying VLAN ID 4095, the broadcast address. The guest OS has to tag and untag traffic on its own, and it's possible to enter a VLAN trunk range with IDs, and they will be passed to the guest OS. So what does this actually mean? It means that if we are going to the virtual center server and we are going to the properties of this virtual center server, distributed port group, it means that if we are going to trunk, we can specify a range with addresses that are enabled on or that are filled out for my virtual machine. So let's take the next VLAN ID 22 to 22. Okay. So I configured trunking on the distributed switch port group on my switch. So what else do I have to do? I have to configure trunking on my Cisco switch. I only have to modify this because I'm using 22 right now. Okay. Modify 22. Okay. So the Cisco switch is configured. Don't forget to actually create a new VLAN ID. Okay. Apply. Okay, so now we don't have internet access, I can assure you, because we have to do some other things. The traffic is routed to the virtual machine, and the virtual machine has to do tagging and untagging itself. There's a nice little trick. When you configure your virtual machine with an E1000, E1000 network adapter from Intel, I'm going to show you, this virtual machine is configured with an E1000 from Intel. There's a possibility to install the drivers from Intel into your virtual machine. And this enables you to configure VLAN ID tagging within the guest OS. So if I'm going to hardware, I'm at virtual machine right now, I'm going to hardware, I'm going to my device manager. This is my physical virtual network card. I already installed the drivers. I'm going to the properties, and within those properties I'm able to do tagging and untagging within the guest OS. So I'm putting in VLAN ID 22 right here. And what's really interesting is that your normal network card will be overshadowed by a new virtual network adapter. And the virtual network adapter is configured with VLAN ID 22. And if I'm going to look at the properties of my network cards, I see my local area connection. This card, when you look at it, you will see that TCP/IP is disabled. So this card is actually doing all the packing and unpacking, and this card is enabled with TCP/IP. Only one problem: there's DHCP configured, so we're gonna configure an alternate address. Take 105. Okay. I think this will work. Cool. We have to do this on another machine also, because I want to show you that both virtual machines can talk to each other, and they are doing tagging and untagging within their own guest OS. So let's jump to virtual machine 4, which is configured at the other ESX host. And let's do the same trick. Virtual machine 4, go to the hardware, go to the device manager, configure the Intel card, and put in VLAN ID 22, I believe it was, on the E1000 card. So 22 is created. Okay. I have to configure an IP address also on this network card. So this is 5 properties. I think I will give it 106. That will work. Okay, 255. Okay. Let's see. I must be able to ping virtual machine 1 with 105. That's strange. It doesn't work. Let's find out what's wrong. Well, I forgot to click the close button on the network configuration. So let's try to ping virtual machine 1. Okay, great. It's pinging. Let's go to virtual machine 1. Of course I can ping back to 106, but this is so cool, I want to actually see it. So let's ping at 106. Right, it's working. So let's take a look at the settings. This is my distributed virtual port group. It's configured with VLAN trunking with a range from 20 to 22. This is my Cisco switch. On the Cisco switch I've configured VLAN trunking, and VLAN trunking is configured for port 2 and 3 on VLAN ID 22, and I created a VLAN ID with 22. So the guest OS is actually doing the tagging and untagging right now. Cool. Let's go back to the slides. And the private VLAN. The private VLAN has a primary VLAN and a secondary VLAN. And the primary VLAN is it's responsible for it's the placeholder for smaller groups, and the secondary VLANs are the smaller groups within a primary private VLAN. So if you are using private VLANs, there are three kinds of different primary VLANs that can be used. You can use promiscuous. Promiscuous is used for is able to contact virtual machines in secondary VLANs like community or isolated VLANs, and you can use the promiscuous VLAN as a router. So what we will do is place the router in a promiscuous VLAN ID. There is an isolated VLAN, an isolated primary VLAN, and this isolated primary VLAN, the virtual machines that are configured with an isolated private VLAN are not able to contact each other, but they can only talk to a primary VLAN. And the third one is the community VLAN. And the community VLAN, in a community VLAN, virtual machines can talk to each other, and they can talk to a primary VLAN. So this could be a few virtual machines for a company, and they are hosted on a shared environment where other companies also are renting out virtual machines. An isolated VLAN can be used, for instance, for a VDI environment where desktops don't need to see each other, but only can contact the outside world, or for instance, an internet provider with a DMZ, and the web servers are running isolated. If one of the web servers is hacked, they cannot compromise one of the other servers. So let's try to configure private VLAN ID tagging. First of all, I have to reconfigure my virtual machines because they are still configured with the driver from Intel. So is this hard to do? No, it isn't. You just go to the properties of your network card, you go to VLANs, and you remove the VLAN. You will notice that the second virtual machine of the second adapter will be deleted, and the VLAN tagging is gone from this one. So we also have to do this at virtual machine 4. The virtual machine 4 device manager. Okay, properties, VLANs, remove. Cool. Yes. So my virtual machines are clean again. I don't know if I have to reconfigure the original adapter. We will see. I think that TCP/IP is re-enabled and that my old IP address is still available. Yeah, that's right. So what we have to do right now is go to our virtual center server, and on switch level we have to create private VLANs. So this is the primary VLAN ID we are going to create, and we can enter it right here. So the primary VLAN ID will be 23. Okay, and the private VLAN ID will be 23. Have to check something out. And the secondary VLAN IDs, let's create an isolated with 23, 24, and let's create a community with 25. Hello, 25. Community 25, isolated 24, and promiscuous 23. I hope that I'm able to remember that. Okay, so the switch is configured. Now we have to configure the distributed virtual port group. And when you are going to the VLAN part of your port group, you can put in a private VLAN ID. And these are the choices you can configure. So you configure them on switch level, and they can be enabled on port group level. So I'm going to first test isolated 23, 24. Okay, and I'm also going to add an additional port group, new port group. It's called the router port group, which will be used for my virtual router, private VLAN, and this one is the promiscuous one. Okay. So I have to reconfigure my virtual machine router, edit settings, and I'm placing the second network adapter in the router port group. Okay. So that network adapter is in the promiscuous port group. Don't forget to configure your Cisco switch. So I think we only have to add an additional 23, 24 and 25 to this one. Okay. You have to do this, otherwise it doesn't work. You have to add your private and your community and your isolated VLAN ID to the Cisco switch. This is good. I'm going to modify this one, and I'm going to say that 23 to 25. Modify 23 through 25. Okay, let's apply this configuration. So, what do we want to test? Virtual machines must be able to ping each other, and virtual machines must be able to contact the outside. So, are virtual machines able to ping each other? Let's find out. I hope that the Cisco switch is fast enough with reconfiguring. It isn't. Well, I'm going to show you what I did wrong. At least I forgot to remember which sort of port group I created. So I configured this port group with VLAN ID isolated. So what I did was trying to ping to VM3. So is it going to work? No, it isn't, because virtual machines are isolated. They can only talk to the outside world and they cannot see each other. So even though they are configured on the same virtual machine port group, they still cannot ping each other. This is virtual machine 4. It can ping itself, but it cannot ping virtual machine 1 and virtual machine 2. I should be able to connect to the internet. That's working. That's great. Okay, so my isolated port group functions real well. Let's check if it's the virtual machines are really in one port group. They are not able to ping each other. They are only able to go to the promiscuous port group, and that's the router right here. So my router is configured on the promiscuous port group. So let's add another port group, and we are going to create two communities. So the second port group, number 2, VLAN ID, private VLAN IDs, and we are taking the community. Okay, and this one needs to be reconfigured. We are also creating a community. Oh, we're not community. Cool. So those are 2 communities. I have to reconfigure the virtual machine, or at least 2 of them. Let's reconfigure virtual machine 4 and put it in community 2. And let's configure virtual machine 1 on the other ESX host and put it in another community. So that's really what we want to see. Okay. So virtual machine 2 and 3 must be able to ping each other and talk to the outside world, to my router, and virtual machine 1 and 4 must be able to talk to each other. So I'm at 4 now. I must be able to ping VM1. It's working. I must not be able to ping VM2. It's working. Strange. I must not be able to ping VM3. Let's find out what went wrong. Well, I made a really stupid mistake. What I did was that I configured 2 communities who are able to talk to each other. So if we really want to test this, we have to add another community. You learn by making mistakes. It's no problem. So 23. What I want to do is create another community, and we are going to use 26 for this. And this will be a community. Okay. And when we are going to the properties, we are going to configure my first with 2326. Okay, so this is a community, this is a community. Don't forget to configure your Cisco switch, because otherwise the traffic is not routed properly. Let's configure the VLANs. Let's add another VLAN ID to the Cisco switch 26 for my second community. And also configure the ports, and we're going to modify them, and we're going to let 26 through. I think we need to take a little break to let the Cisco switch, but we can do an overview of the settings. Okay, so 2 communities. Virtual machines are connected. Virtual machine 1 and 4 are in this port group. This port group is configured with VLAN ID 2523. And this port group is configured with VLAN ID 2326. My Cisco switch is up and running. I added 26 to the VLAN IDs. I configured 23 to 26, so I should be able to, I'm right now at VM4, I should not be able to ping VM3, I should also not be able to ping VM2, but I should be able to ping VM1. Yeah, it's working, and I should have internet access. That's working also. So let's jump to virtual machine number 2. Virtual machine number 2 is in the other community. Virtual machine number 2 must not be able to ping to virtual machine number 1. That's correct. It must also not be able to ping to virtual machine number 4. That's also correct. And it must not be able to ping to... It must be able to ping to virtual machine 3. So that's working. And I should have internet access. Great. Okay, cool. So, that's it for now. This was my first Camtasia online training course. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I provided you with enough information for configuring community, private and promiscuous VLANs on Cisco switches and on your virtual center server. Eric Sloef is signing off. Hope to see you next time again online. Thank you.